Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Faith Over Fears podcast. I want to thank you and God bless all of you listening in and being here with me today. Just to start it off with a short story, I got to talk to one of my old buddies from my marching band in high school, and he and I got to catch up a little bit, and we kind of goofed around and made each other laugh over Snapchat. So it was really nice getting to catch up with him, and I love catching up with old friends, especially him being from marching band. And for those of you who don't know, marching band, especially for our school, was very huge and very important to our school. We have the biggest band in Kansas, I believe, with over 200 kids, and it's pretty insane. So you get to know a lot of people, and he was one of the good buddies I got to know early on. So I know I've kind of been skipping out on hat questions and stuff like that, but that's mostly because we haven't had a whole bunch of questions. So I think in replace of that, I'm gonna kind of just talk about what I've been going through, and maybe give my own thoughts about it, and maybe some opinions or advice I would give, given through the experiences I've had. So first off, I've had a lot of friends of mine. I ended up buying, and my dad and I kind of had similar problems in late middle school to early high school, because we would be one of the only guys that would work and make pretty decent money. Like right now, I have two jobs, and I also host this podcast. And of course, the podcast isn't making me anything, but it's still fun to run and kind of host. But yeah, like my dad told me when he was in high school that his father called him Santa Claus, and the reason being would be because he would always help pay for his buddies. He would pay for their meals. He would pay for presents. He would get him presents on Christmas, and no one would ever give him anything. And I'm kind of falling in that same boat where I think I'm caring too much about people who don't really care about me, which is definitely a problem. But unfortunately, I don't want to say this in like a showing off or boasting way, but I think I'm just too generous to most people and kind of expect the best out of everyone, which I shouldn't do, first of all, because that's, we're all human, so I know we can't be perfect. So I am definitely working on that, though, because I know that can be frustrating, having kind of really high expectations kind of expected, especially from just a decent friend. And for those of you who might be going through the same thing, I'm gonna give you like my perspective or my opinion on what I think should happen. And you don't have to do it, but it's just a thought. But I've recently kind of just been not ignoring my friends, but kind of not taking any further steps or initiating anything further than the conversation. So what I mean by that is, let's say a buddy of mine reaches out and says, "Hey, how you been?" Most of the time I'll just say, "I've been pretty good," or "it's been rough," and then I ask them, "Hey, how are you?" And then they'll tell me, and then I think at that point, if they're expecting you to initiate further conversation, don't do it. Okay, because they originally initiated the conversation for you, so either they're wanting to ask you something, so we need to give them space and let them ask, or they're just kind of they're trying to get something out of you or a reaction of some sort. So I would just kind of keep your responses simple, and then again, just kind of don't really initiate anything unless if further asked or further responded by your friend, family member, or whoever. Um, and I noticed it's been a bit helpful because I'm not like expecting so much, you know. And although that might sound bad, having low expectations, I'm never disappointed. You know, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is because I'm not expecting other people to be, you know, responding every 3 seconds like, you know, how I would like a person to respond. You know, I kind of get used to it, and I'm satisfied with how they respond and how quickly they respond. So that's um, I think that might help with some of you out there. Some of you, you may have a different approach that may work better for you. So, um, and then what else have I been going through? Oh boy. Um, I would say self discipline and management, like your own managing and self discipline, is very important. For me, again, having two jobs, it's very important that I know how to communicate to my workers or even my coworkers. And the importance behind that is to make sure there's no miscommunication, which, excuse me, which of course is ideal, but in a further context, it's more like going the extra mile and communicating, even though you know that you're like 95% sure you already know the outcome. Just go ahead and check in and get the full 100% um, accuracy that you need within the communication between coworkers or workers. And I found that to be very helpful because one, it kind of shows that you're very proactive, and it can be beneficial, especially when you're looking, or if you recently started a job, or if you're trying to apply for a job. It shows that your initiative to start things and get them finished is very good. So that'll look good on you. But then also with just coworkers and people that you work with, it'll make it a lot easier for them to work with you. And I think like compatibility with one another would be just increasingly like better between both ends of the line, because I know it can be hard working with someone that doesn't communicate well, because that's basically how all of my friends have been, as well as a few coworkers, not a lot of coworkers, but definitely a few. Um, and that's just the way they run. You can't change them. You can't force them to be more communicating type. You know, you just gotta let them do what they like to do. You know, like for me, I'm a very, you know, stick to the schedule, make sure we communicate, figure out things ahead of time. You know, and most of my friends were very laid back and go with the flow and just kind of wing it people, which is probably why we didn't end up working out as well as the group thought we would. So yeah, it's just kind of been, I won't lie, it's been pretty rough, especially in quarantine, and it's definitely kind of a huge factor into this whole, you know, oh, life stinks, you know, because one, we can't be as social as we used to, and even if you are social, there is just some sort of like awkwardness within being social with people, because either you can only text them, or if you're going out, I can safely assume that most people just think it's weird how everything's closed down, or there's lots of rules with the things that aren't closed down. Um, So yeah, it's very interesting to say the least. But I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up. Uh, I was reading, what was it? In the Bible, I read a verse, and this verse I read was actually, I read this today for my daily devotional, and it was Psalm 56 3 through 4. So it's actually two verses that you'll read. And if you don't want to read two, I don't really like reading anyways, but for those of you who don't want to read two, you can always just read the verse 3 of Psalm 56, because that's kind of the more impactful and more meaningful verse. But it does kind of play into verse 4 as well, so I would encourage you that you read verse 4 as well as verse 3. So I hope you guys enjoyed our podcast, and I'm sorry they're not as long as I'd hope, because I know eventually I want to get some more people, maybe a co-host and maybe some other people involved. So I'm still working on finding people, because most people are either working on schoolwork or just life issues that they have. So I don't blame them or judge them for any of that, because I know I'm going through some of those same things that they're going through. But yeah, I think having these short podcasts are pretty good for now, because I know that a lot of people, either for those people who don't have a lot of time, they can, listen to one of these like once a week or twice a week when they're working or if they have downtime. But for those who do have a lot of extra time, they can kind of monitor when and where they listen to the podcast, because we've already made, I think this is the 9th episode, so we've already made 8 other episodes. And if you're listening to this one and this is your first podcast that you're listening to, go ahead and check out the other 8, because they are pretty good, I think, at least. So again, guys, thank you for joining me, and God bless you for all being here. I know this is kind of a very slow start to those listening. It's definitely weird for everyone, especially Faith Over Fear and Novacom. Both of our parties are a bit, I would say, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit slowed and kind of confused with what's going on, because we're still looking for editors and maybe some extra people to help out. So that's probably why things seem to be slowing down. But don't worry, we're gonna do our best to keep it up and updated for you guys. So again, and also, if you guys haven't seen the Faith Over Fear's news, that is mostly run by our Novacom party, and they do really good with giving us kind of information and details about what's going on in today's world, both politically and socially. So if you guys ever want to check that out, it's always, again, it's still in the same account. It is under, basically, the daily recap is the news portion, and then the wake-up call is the podcast, for those of you who may be wondering which is which. So again, guys, thank you for being here, and God bless as always. And lastly, see ya.